We're going to start right at 2:30 as promised, but in the meantime, really important question. Now, who will you root for in the Super Bowl? The Patriots? Okay, there's some Patriots fans, and the Rams. And some don't care at all. I heard the Rams picked up fans in 49 other states. A lawsuit filed? On officiating? Wow. I only saw the replay. I wasn't watching it, but I saw the replay. Yeah. By the way, if you're feeling a long ways away, there's plenty of seats up front. I know we're Presbyterians and all, but it's like there's lots of friendly seats up here if anybody wants to.
Probably no Italian
Okay, you are here. And God is here. And I have been looking forward to this afternoon immensely. I really have looked forward to it. And I will say to you that I consider these future forums to be a very significant part of our North Lake discernment process and community. So I'm very grateful for you taking time on a lovely Tuesday afternoon to be here. Last night we had approximately 60 to 65 who were here for the Future Forum to focus specifically on children and youth, young families, and little blessings. And probably have about that, maybe a little bit more here for this afternoon on property and finances. I want to say a word before we even have our opening prayer. I believe strongly that the way we do our work and decision making as a church is a significant witness for Jesus Christ. That's actually a Presbyterian thing to say. That the manner in which we do our decision making and our process is important. And in some ways, it's not only the outcomes of decisions, it's also the way that we go about it that honors God and respects others who are in our midst and in our community. And I really believe that it's essential in a world that is increasingly strident and uncivil, and where disagreements and outrage are the order of the day in so many ways. I believe and hold to a hope that in the church, and particularly in North Lake, we do our utmost to have a culture that talks hard issues and does it in a way that is respectful and inquisitive and open. And we're trying to be as transparent as we can be. We come here with questions. I know that. I also believe that there's nothing that we say today that will be a surprise to God. And there's nothing that we discuss today that is beyond the capacity of God to manage, to handle, to solve, to lead and guide. And so, again, I thank you for being here and for your desire to engage. I think it's so important and refreshing to have you here. And it's important God's here. So let's talk to the Lord. Lord, thank you for a beautiful day. Thanks for the reason that we are together. Thank you for the North Lake Presbyterian Church, for this congregation, for those who have preceded us here. as members and staff and leaders. And thank you for this moment in our time. We ask for your guidance. We give you thanks and praise for this beautiful building and campus, and for the vibrant ministries that take place here, and for the lives that are transformed for Jesus Christ. Hear our praise, our gratitude, but also come and be close with us now and help us to hear you even as we listen to each other. To you be all the honor and glory and praise today and forever, we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So this forum is actually the 6th forum that we've done since last summer. And just would like for you to realize that, come on in. There's even a few spots up front if you want. So this is the 6th of the forums that we have offered. 3 of them were last summer. They were done in conjunction with the report of the bodybuilders team. More on that in a moment. And then we did one in December as we uncovered a number of questions that related to the contemporary worship service. Those who attend the contemporary worship, we did one in December that was focused with them. And another one that was last night, I just alluded to it, and that was from children, youth, and young families. And so this one today has a particular focus on property and on finances and so the infrastructure of the church, if you will. And so I'm really glad that we have a chance to do this. I think it's an open conversation for sharing some leadership thoughts, for hearing your input, and for fielding questions. And there are at least 2 purposes that go along with this. One is it's part of the collaborative discernment process. I said last night that, I don't want to go up on the mountain and bring down the stone tablets, and I'll probably end up breaking them anyway. In the meantime, golden calves can get cast. And that model of top-down leadership is not one that has served well in most church settings. Rather, I am committed to a process that is highly collaborative, where we listen to each other. It involves, we have some great officers. There's a lot of people in this room and in this church who are wiser and more experienced than I. And so this is why it's important to be together for these conversations. The second part of, so that's purpose is to, have a collaborative discernment process. The second is to promote community, right? To promote our sense of community. So the more we talk about this, I think the more it strengthens our connection to each other and to God. And that's why I said earlier that the way we do it, how we go about it, I think is it's constructive, it edifies, it constructs community when we do it well. So that's what we're after. I just say that's the intent of such a future forum. And I am so glad you were here. I also, I want to point out that we have elders who were here also. And let me ask all of our current session members who are here to stand up. All of our current elders, all right? So starting over here, we have Becky Brose, Rose Gorman, and Dottie Wise. At the back is Wayne Butler and Richard Veiling, and Bill Johnston and Tom Ledoux. And Dick Young is out of town. And I do also want to thank you so much for being here. They're here to help answer questions, but also to listen to what's being asked and to listen to what's being shared. It's very intentional that our session is here almost in its entirety. I also want to highlight the fact that Elder Jim Crutchfield is here. He is an elder, but he is now not a voting elder, but he's on the session as our clerk. And guess what? We're putting him to work here today so that he can capture comments and questions that are raised up as a part of this meeting. And so thanks to Jim, who does a great job as a record-keeping, harvesting what's happening here today. One other kind of important thing is we are today video recording this meeting. so that I had a number of folks last night ask, is it being video recorded? And so we said, we'll make every effort for that to happen. My thanks to our staff. I want to thank Cindy Kubek, and I want to thank Mike Snow for their work here. They've done a great job getting us ready and making sure we're set. It does mean that whenever you are sharing, and I'll remind you this again later, but whenever you are sharing or asking a question, we're going to make sure you use a microphone and use it so you can be heard by the room as well as by anybody who's watching the video. And I'll remind you, and we'll also ask you just to identify yourself by name. That'll just help the rest of us who are here and anybody who might be watching it. So any questions about the process? Any questions you have just about the process? I'm wanting to share about 20 to 25 minutes of an overview. Rather than bringing multiple people up at the beginning, I'll do a sort of an overview, a summary of some things, and it'll be on a PowerPoint, so you'll be able to see it. And if you want a copy of it later, we can easily, but we didn't print out copies of the PowerPoint. We just thought if you want it, we can give you access to it. And then following that, we'll really be open for discussion, for questions. And so there should be ample time for that. I don't know what time you go to dinner, but we're going to be done before that. I do want to also invite persons who were on the bodybuilders team to stand up. Anybody who is on the BBT bodybuilders team. All right, so Sue Kirkpatrick and Dottie Wise are the two who are able to be here today. Mike Snow would be standing as well. He helped out as a staff liaison with that. And we had several others, so thank you. Because I'm going to quote from I actually went back and read that. It's something that was produced over the first 6 months of last year or 5 months of last year. And I went back and read it, and I've looked at it a few times since, so it's not just sitting on the shelf. You know what? It's still relevant. It's still loaded with insight and with things that are true and reflective of our situation. And in case you haven't read it, I want to highlight a couple things about that, just sort of a brief refresher. And then beyond that, I want to focus in on a couple of key things that relate to our current situation, property, and finances. And then we'll open it up for all your questions and comments. First of all, the thing that we were noting without any hesitation is that our core purpose is making disciples. That's who we are. That's why the church exists. That's why any church exists. If we fail to fulfill that purpose of making disciples, we have failed being the body of Christ. And so as Colossians 1:28 reminds us, it's that we want to present everyone mature in Christ. And we do that for all ages. So what happens with the younger, with the children, with the youth, and all the way up through all ages and stages is to help people keep growing. Another verse is grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And we intend for that to be the heart of who we are. That's our heartbeat. And it's discipleship for all ages. I also want to just say to you that as we think about our North Lake organization, this has been around for several years now, we identify discipleship as the keystone. I know it may be hard to read, but I'll just tell you, the keystone here is discipleship. Worship and welcome is probably the most visible. People's experience is, Sunday morning for most, and that's what they see. It's kind of high profile. We see care and fellowship, which is on your left side as you're looking. The blocks of care and fellowship have to do with our deacons. Deacons, if you're here, stand up, would you please? All of our deacons who are here, stand up. Joan and Joe and Paul, thank you so much for being here and representing a new office for North Lake of caregiving, which is wonderful. And so we have care and fellowship. The more you are engaged in the fellowship of the church, the more you experience and express care. Those two things go together, care and fellowship. We also think ministry and mission go together. And so we have ministry coaches now trying to help people to figure out where to plug in and how to serve and how do we fulfill our mission as a church. I've gone through this just to say to you, prayer's at the center of it all has to be, it's an ongoing conversation with God to ask for help. And administration is at the foundation. Administration. Administration is to try to help us provide all of the infrastructure and the resources we need to fulfill our mission. And that includes finances, includes property, it includes other assets, it includes staffing. Personnel has to oversee what happens and how do we provide compensation and benefits. So administration is very important. I will tell you that when I left seminary after 2 years to do an internship, a very large church about the size of North Lake, I was invited there, and I arrived just about the time the senior pastor's wife died of cancer, and he needed to take time off. And he knew me as a young man, he had specifically asked me to come there to help him because he was without other clergy staff. So I had 2 years of seminary under my belt. And I preached 7 consecutive weeks at that very large church. And what I found was that the most needful role that I had was not simply Sunday morning. It had to do with the other leadership issues that went on with regard to managing a staff, moderating a session, assisting a finance committee establish a budget, so many other elements of that are related to administration. So when I went back to Princeton for my final year, I went in and told my advisor, who was one of the greatest preaching instructors in the world, that I was leaving preaching and going to church administration. And he scowled at me. And he said, "What in the world are you doing? You're ruining yourself." And we actually had a playful relationship. But in fact, I went back and took every course I could take on conflict management and administration of education and so forth. And I've never, ever regretted that. Administration is really important. How we do it, again, is very important. And I value our church administrator and all those who are paying attention to this, because if we don't do this well, it hampers our effectiveness accomplishing our mission, right? Right. I think you all get that. But I want you to know that as somebody who's gone through seminary training, it wasn't self-evident to me when I went to seminary. After my internship, that's when I knew I needed to take everything they had to offer on it. With respect to the BBT report and input that we got from so many, we saw that there were a lot of identified strengths. Quickly, we realized from what you told us that our Sunday morning worship and music were strengths to build on. Congregational care was something highly appreciated and affirmed. We also heard you say that our community impact is a great strength, our mission footprint, if you will. Our current facilities are a strength. And we had leadership as a strength in the moment. There were limiting factors. We were hearing about some factors that were not going as well. No surprise, we told you, parking was by far and away the leading concern that was registered in the congregational survey. By the way, we've been hearing some improvements about that. We've been hearing some affirmation about that going better in between services, and we're grateful for steps in that direction. One of the other weaknesses that we observed is a lack of focus and coherence. And I'll just say one quick word on that. When a church is growing rapidly, it's easy for things to take off and grow in every direction. And that's essentially what was happening. When a church is growing very rapidly, many things are going to go in many, many directions. You know, but North Lake hasn't been growing for 10 years as much, right? And so that begins to expose some of the things that aren't as connected and coordinated as they need to be effective. And that's part of what we were observing. And so we need to be very intentional now about what things do we tackle and how well are we doing them. Communication, of course, is always a need, especially in a large church, and the building needs began to emerge. We were hearing from folks that there were a number of things that had not been addressed previously, like, any choir members here? All right. So we were hearing from a lot of choir members about the space that had been anticipated for a choir space enlargement or enhancement, and that hadn't been accomplished. So that surfaced several times, again, within the BBT and then over the summer. We heard persons referring to the absence of a conference room. Actually, I was struck by that when I first arrived here. There's no conference room to just sit down with the family to plan a funeral service. Right? There's no place to, a classroom. Sometimes the library would work, but it was just nothing that was really set up for that. So we began to look around and see that even the office spaces are peculiar, that to go see Pastor Mike, you'd have to walk through 2 other pastors' spaces to get there. And so there are a number of things that didn't make sense for congregational care. And another objective then was the chapel. And we'll say a little bit more about that later. The BBT report also spoke of our mission portfolio, including a big 3. Right? The big 3, I hope you're all aware of. The big 3 have been Operation Homebound, Christian Food Pantry, and also Little Blessings. All 3 of them had a 20th anniversary last year. Right? So amazing and beautiful to see what that impact has been. I want to spend the next several moments on Little Blessings. And this is probably where some of it gets hard. I know it did last night. So our Little Blessings Christian Preschool, and actually that name was just legally changed last summer. It had been called a daycare center. But we are a VPK, a voluntary pre-kindergarten, and so there are elements of that really are legit preschool, so we want to make sure that was reflected in the name. We've been trying to look at Little Blessings in a big picture kind of way. We are very grateful for its impact and for the ways that it has functioned blessing children and families. And it would be hard to overestimate the impact of Linda Brown and her, as a director, and what she's been able to do, her commitment and her faith in blessing kids and other members of the staff. I think that in the second half of 2017, we experienced several things that propelled us to look deeper at Little Blessings. I'll put up here a couple things on the screen that'll help you. In July, we had blocked rain gutters that led to significant flooding and damage and interruption of the function, the operation of Little Blessings. Very, very costly. Probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't a modular structure, but that certainly contributed to it. Very expensive. You may remember Irma paid a visit here in September. While we didn't have massive damage, it still required closing down the school for a week, and that meant no revenue from the families. They weren't paying for it, but we were still doing payroll and had other costs, so that was a costly part of it. We had we learned that there was a requirement for an upgraded playground. That cost $21,000. We were also experiencing lower enrollment, and the combination of those meant that we had a confluence of several factors that meant a very costly year for Little Blessings. In the midst of that, there was a request for additional staffing. Let's get someone here, or maybe 2 who are full-time, that would allow us to increase our enrollment. Meantime, we were looking at all the benefits questions for the entire staff. You know what's happening to medical costs and cost of medical insurance. We were reluctant to hire anyone else at full-time with benefits until we had a new framework for that for all of our employees. That, by the way, is something that the session with the Finance and Personnel Committee worked out all through a year and then accomplished that last summer. During that time, we had a moratorium not to hire anyone full-time. But the point for the Little Blessings is that it was losing money and it was arousing concern. So we commissioned a Little Blessings Strategic Planning Committee to study their financial and operational dimensions and make some recommendations. Jim and Sue Bodenner were on that committee. Anybody else? So they were on the Strategic Little Blessings team. Anybody else on that? I'm sure there were. Yeah, Jim's got his hand up. And Dottie was on that, right? And Becky, you were on that too. Where's Becky? I know she stepped out for a minute then. Yeah, Becky was on it. There were 8 or 9 folks who served on that committee. Part of what we found, and now I'm going to itemize concerns, and I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. I'm willing to come back and talk about any of them you want. So This is a distillation of over 30 pages of reading and reporting that has come out of the study group and other work. So this is a distillation. We have concerns regarding liability. Huge concerns for exposure for the church to be sued around children and children being on our campus, but particularly for a school. Security is a major issue, and that's true because you have, some family situations where there are disputed domestic rights, and so there are always concerns, and you know this from the news about security for schools. We also have increased worries about safety, and I experience that personally because I normally park right across from the school, and I always intentionally back into a space. So I'm not backing out into the driveway because I see kids crossing that driveway unsupervised. And that is really worrisome to me, and I have voiced that repeatedly. And they're not even supposed to park. Parents should not be parking on that side. But I have seen not only parking there, but I'll see an unattended child running across the driveway. I've seen this many times, while a parent is getting another child out of a car seat. And so that combination with all of our drivers coming in for Operation Homebound, or somebody whose instincts may not be, whose reflexes may not be that quick, is very worrisome to me. We're engaging more competition, a lot more competition in the community for teachers, for students. Regulations is a huge issue because it stipulates what formulas you have to have for how many students in each age group or in each space, how many square footage you have to, so there are formulas. And I put an asterisk beside, several of these that have changed dramatically since we launched it in 1998. Several of these factors have really increased dramatically. We have an inadequate site and facility, and that's on several levels. It's unattractive to families. It's one of the first things our consultant said to us is, wow, it's unsightly, and it doesn't really fit with the overall appearance of the campus. It's poorly designed for drop-off and pickup, which I've acknowledged. It hampers our parking, and it's a modular building with a limited lifespan. It was put up in 2005. We can expect that we can keep it going for a while yet, but we'll also have costs that relate to that. This is a financial model that doesn't work well. In a sense, when Little Blessings has a good year, it's a hooray and it goes into their reserves. When they don't have a good year, as 2017, it is absorbed by North Lake. It's like we are the backstop for that if there's a bad year. And so that's what we're paying attention to. The other thing that we've realized is there is a significant amount of money that's in the infrastructure itself because we have costs absorbed for payroll, for insurance, for the maintenance, many of those things that total. If you do a fair market value on the property and add it all up, it's over $130,000. That North Lake is providing. If they were to go out and do it on their own, it would cost that much. That's not all real dollars because some of that's involved in other things that we would be spending, but it's a significant amount. And then finally, there's a staff time cost dealing with Little Blessings. I don't want to skip over that. I want to call that out because I know how much of my time has gone into Little Blessings. And there's time that I or other staff members could be allocating for other things that may need attention. So the concerns continue. 5 more. There's a lack of structural accountability that's been there for a long period of time. Again, this is because it was growing. It's not a bad thing. It's just that when things are growing and going well, it doesn't get a lot of attention. And there wasn't, frankly, a great deal of strategic planning about where it's going. Is it meeting the standards that we have? That relates to the next one. How well are we accomplishing our purpose of discipleship? And one of the things we discovered last year is that we were not discipling as well as we wanted to be discipling. We even found out that the curriculum wasn't, in all cases, faith-based. Or in some cases, the faculty, the teachers, were not persons of faith. And this was something that we've actually gone on to deal with and try to remedy. But that aroused concerns. Then we have difficulty leveraging Little Blessings as an effective on-ramp for North Lake involvement. We see some, and actually last night we had a number of folks who said our kids were there and they're active members of the church. But there's not lots of them. There's not happening a lot. In fact, we have a harder time integrating North Lake Ministries and members with Little Blessings than you would think, because it's right here on our campus. I know, for example, I can't go over and just shake hands with family members as they arrive, because it's also a daycare center, so they come at all times and leave at all times. It's not like there's a 15-minute window where I could go over and greet people as they're arriving. And because it takes a security clearance to get in there or to volunteer there, it minimizes the amount of integration that can happen. Finally, Linda Brown, and it's like I say LB equals LB. Linda Brown equals Little Blessings. I mean, they've gone together. She is there from the start. She is looking ahead to retirement and not pinpointing the time yet, but it's not far off, and we got to look at a succession plan. I've gone through this with you because something has happened to me as the head of staff and pastor here that has changed over the last 6 to 8 months. And I wanted you to get a feel for that before I told you what's happened. I'll show you on this next slide. If you think about, I put together a graph. If you think about knowledge, how much knowledge do you have about Little Blessings? And then how much support do you have for Little Blessings? It might be a graph something like this. The y-axis is knowledge and understanding of Little Blessings. The x-axis is how much support do you feel for Little Blessings. And I would suppose that the majority of our North Lake members are probably in the blue rectangle area. Generally supportive, maybe not real strong, but not knowing a whole lot about it. That's kind of what we've experienced. Folks don't know a whole lot about it. And now Linda would be a 10-10. I mean, she would be, she's knowledgeable and strong. And we have others who would be, you could plot yourself up there where you think you are. I know what's happened to me. I know that when I arrived here, I didn't know a whole lot, but I was really excited we had Little Blessings here on the campus. I was really excited that we had a daycare center and children who are here. What's occurred for me the last 6 to 8 months is the more I've learned, the harder it is for me to promote or support Little Blessings into a viable, sustainable future. And I've said that now to our session. I've said that at the gathering last night. It's harder and harder to do that when you look at all the factors and the risks that are involved. And so I've actually moved from being stronger to waffling on that as I've learned more about what we're facing. Long-term possibilities, we're looking at, there's one notion, and one that was sort of a driving notion through last spring and summer, is to grow, relocate it, and to create a nonprofit corporation, a 501c3 separate corporation, and perhaps find other collaborating churches and other partners in the community to enable a more stable future. And I still think that's a glowing option. I think we have increasing questions about the viability of it. The way I say it, I'm not sure I can see the bridge to that future now, in terms of the funding, the leadership required for it, and the maybe even the North Lake support for that. How do we get there? And so that's one of the things. And we're still waiting for a final report from a consultant. Session hired a consultant last summer and made an intentional decision to get somebody who is a national expert on daycares or preschools. And he came from Chicago, spent time with us in September, was midway through his process of doing it, and had a stroke in October. And then as he was recovering from that, he had another stroke. So we're still waiting for him. And I'd ask you to be in prayer for Bob Siegel, just for him, because he needs our prayers. But we're looking at, is this feasible? And we're really looking for input from him. Status quo is another option, which is to postpone any decision. It means we can make some minor improvements, cover what we need to for the time being. There's still exposure on the other risks of liability and safety and security. Still a factor that hampers our parking, and we have a number of continuing concerns. We'd be leaving the issue for somebody else to deal with. And again, the more I learn about it, the harder it is for me to feel like a leader who can just leave that for somebody else. So that's part of my reaction to it. The other is to move the current building to the perimeter of the property, and that might gain us some better parking and maybe even design a better pickup and drop-off area. It's very costly to do that. The cost-benefit analysis probably argues against that because you don't gain a whole lot for what you spend on that. Two other possibilities that we see. One is to downsize it, retrofit it into our existing building, which has, that's where it started, was in this hallway. It began over here in the hallway. And to go back to that again, it would maybe be a glide path for Linda on the way to her retirement. But in order to do that, we would face some costs for room modifications to make it suitable again for a preschool. And we would lose access to those rooms for all the other things we do in them currently, so it would decrease our availability for space. You need to have a playground. Playground would have to be relocated. Doing it out here might not be the best solution for a variety of reasons, including if you put a chapel out here sometime, that the chapel and a memorial service could be going on at the same time you have kids playing in a playground, and that's not a good mix. So all of this is to say that we don't think bringing it back into the building is the preferred option. You'd also have much more congestion at the Rolling Acres entrance for pickup and drop-off as the day goes forward. So another one is to celebrate and close Little Blessings. This is really hard. I mean, last night our meeting took place with the front filled with 4 or 5 members of the Little Blessings staff. And we know the impact that this has for staff and for families and stakeholders. There are 3 or 4 families who are church members or attendees, who are also connected with Little Blessings. So we feel that pain. We talked about that last night. But that may be something that's needed to have a clear and reasoned decision. And it's hard to discontinue doing anything the church has been doing for a while. I said to them, and I'll say to you, I did not come to North Lake to be the pastor who closes Little Blessings. Right? I didn't come to do that. I certainly didn't anticipate even talking about this. And so if God has another way, I want to see what that way is. I want to see what that way is. I want to know where does it go. And we talk about this, then we're looking backward and thinking forward, and we are still in a season of discernment. And one of the things that was said last night was maybe we just need to have a summit of all the pastors of local churches or other community leaders to see is there momentum or interest from anyone else, others, to create a collaboration to do it. Right? And I said, I'm willing to blow the trumpet to try to get that together. I know I cannot be the one who is the engineer of the train getting it there. But that's one of the things. I'm going on this in a pretty detailed way because it feels so important to me. Session and staff leadership want to emphasize the future of Little Blessings and the future of the Tig Trail property that we'll be talking about. They have to be disconnected. They have to be uncoupled. They have to be seen separately. Because we are not proposing a North Lake relocation of Little Blessings to that property. And that's really important for me to say that and emphasize that. If you'd asked the BBT in May of last year when we wrote the report, that was the leading assumption and connection between the two. Right? And so I have to be clear, and you'll be hearing me say this repetitively because I know That's something that is lodged in the minds of many because it's in print, and I help put it there. But that's why I also say things have changed in what we've seen since then with other data and other perspectives. That's what's changed. So we're not proposing a move of Little Blessings and building on Tig Trail property. To do so would be a conservative, somebody's put out the figure last night, $3 million for the development of the site and the construction of a school suitable for a 21st century preschool and what to do. So again, if God has a way to that, God can part the Red Sea, God can get people into the promised land. So I'm not saying God can't do it. What I'm saying is I don't see the bridge to that future right now. And so we're continuing to be in prayer about it. We do think that as we talk about the property, there may be other multi-purpose, multi-generational ways to use it for discipleship, to fulfill our mission. So, how are we doing? I've already gone too long. Property options, real fast now, and just a couple more things. Concerns about parking capacity. We're landlocked on this campus. Many people expressed laments that we missed opportunities in the past. So one of the things BBT heard, and I heard it when I first arrived here, we could have done this or we could have done that. Denny's told me that. I've heard that from Gary Lester. There are things that were options. And it's not bad, it's just having heard that, we wanted to make sure that we were looking at the possibilities in the area. While the BBT was meeting and had no intent of talking about property, we became aware of two other options. One is across the street and medical professional complex, condo there, and the other was the one that's 8.5 acres down on Route 25 and Griffin Avenue. And basically, we said we need to be good stewards of opportunities and just have a season of discernment. We're really trying to look and see where are we. And the session said, let's take a good, hard look at that. The tough thing is, we knew it was competitive. We knew there were others who were in active pursuit of the property. And so what we did was, the session entered into a sales agreement contingent on congregational approval. Contingent on congregational approval. Some of you were here for the process. Some of you may have been away last summer when it happened. But the idea was, let's be in a season of discernment and really try to weigh this out and see what happens in the discussion. We had 3 open houses at the property. We had 3 forums. Those are all, by the way, online if you'd still like to view them. They were recorded in their entirety. And session actually said, we're going to do this as a 3-year motion. That is to say, we would hold it up to 3 years to see if there's a clear God-driven purpose for us to use this, to accomplish discipleship. And session said it had to be approved by a 75% margin, which is the highest supermajority that you normally see in any voting body. How many of you were at the meeting last? All right, so the majority of you were here. And I said to you when I came back in, after talking to the tellers, and they were looking somewhat dumbfounded about this, and then I pulled out my calculator just to double check, but I knew immediately. They said just mental math, 63 no's, 189 yeses. I mean, you multiply 63 times 3, 189. I mean, I knew instantly. It's like, just like that. It's like, unbelievable. That's exactly 75%. Somebody said to me, I was the deciding vote. Somebody else said, no, I was the deciding vote. No, I was the deciding vote. Like, everybody was the deciding vote. Every person was the deciding vote. So I've never seen that anywhere in all the places and meetings that I've been a part of. Stunning, stunning. And I continue to say, God's in this. What's God telling us? What are we to see in this, and how do we respond to it? Actually stunning to me. By the way, my life would have been a lot easier if we hadn't bought it. Do you understand? My life would be a lot easier. Our leadership challenges would have been considerably easier had we not voted to purchase it. But I am sure, as I am curious, I am sure that there's a reason for that, and we're trying to understand what is that. All right, where are we headed with that? So, I also, I hope you're chomping at the bit because I'm ready to hand this over to you. But a couple quick things. The meantime, last summer, and from BBT and others, we were hearing about, yes, choir space, new space for congregational care, and offices, and a new chapel. For us to have memorial services, funerals, where maybe the average attendance is 75 to 150, and people walk into a sanctuary that accommodates 1,200, 1,100. It just feels like many of those services could be so much more suitable and really sacred in a space that's designed for that. So that's part of the case for it. It would work also for prayer services, for special occasions for worship. And the finances, just a quick hit on this. Our existing debt is $3.25 million. About $750,000 of that is from the purchase of the property. The property purchase price was $846,000. And so we put money down on it, but we have the mortgage is about $750,000 on that. The 2019 budget is a hold the line budget. It's based on 2018 actual spending. It does include, with shuffling some things, the Personnel Committee asked for a cost of living increase for staff. And it didn't quite hit the mark for what's recommended, 2.5 or whatever, 2.8, but there's a 2% increase cost of living for staff. But it's basically a hold the line budget. And we have a planned capital campaign that we're working diligently on. I want to invite those who are part of the campaign committee to stand up. If you're a part of the campaign committee, in fact, I'll have Jim and Dottie up here, and Joan and Jean Corley-Wicks and Bill Johnson and Tom Ledoux, thank you all. This group has been doing an amazing job. Dennis, you're on that too. Don't you wiggle out of it. Okay. So the target goal there is, and this has been talked about since last summer, the target goal is $3 million. That would enable us to do the construction projects that are slated or proposed, as well as to make a significant dent in our overall church mortgage. And one of my objectives as pastor here for hopefully a number more years is that we would get to a point where we are debt-free. I'd love to be able to retire from here and say our debt is also retired. And I'd feel really good about that. But we got to take it in steps. We got to do what we can do. This is our moment now to take a look at that, and that's what is here. So most of your eyes are still open. And now I want to open up to questions. Please use the microphone. So you're heard by all. Please, again, identify yourself. And also, just please be mindful of the length of your sharing. Don't be like me, so that others also get an opportunity. Jim, you're up. I'm told this will take a few seconds to warm up. There you go.
I'm Jim Bodenner. I'm Jim Bodenner, and I spent many hours on the Strategic Planning Committee, tearing into the numbers and looking at the feasibility of Little Blessings. I came to that committee with probably a fairly unique background. As an attorney and as a person who has a very heavy finance background. And after spending many hours looking at it, I completely agree with what Pastor Jeff said. I don't see that the current financial operation is sustainable. And what really concerns me, and it concerns me to this very day, we have 3 core ministries. And we're not generating financial statements or operating statements that reflect the operational cost of each of those 3 ministries. That really concerned me. When we started to do, you can't operate Little Blessings and try to determine what the operating cost of that facility is if you don't include the insurance as an expense, if you don't include a whole host of other expenses in an operating statement. You know, a lot of us have business backgrounds. This is kind of like accounting 101. What is the operating statement of each of our 3 ministries? Little Blessings is losing significant money. Now, it's been a year since I've looked at the operating statements, but unless something has dramatically changed, it lost in excess of $100,000 in 2018 when you factor in all of the total expenses, including, as Pastor Jeff said, there's a cost to his time. You have to have an administrative factor built into your operating statements. It isn't operating financially in a sustainable manner, and as Pastor Jeff said, there are some serious risk factors that we face. One of the ones that absolutely flipped me out was the whole legal liability issue. But you've got staffing issues, a very competitive market for wages and staff. I think we need to really, really reflect on what we're doing. And I'm really concerned when you look at Little Blessings on that new site, if it doesn't cost $3 million when it's all done, lightning will strike me right now, because it will. It has to be built in a first-class manner, and it will cost $3 million. How do we, if we look at our ministry, most of us are retired. Most of us are hoping that our savings, we're all living on fixed incomes, all of us that are retired. You know, some of us did very well in our business lives, and that's great. But we're all living on fixed income. How do we not resolve the Little Blessing issue and the potential of having to raise another $3 million? How can we not resolve that issue before we enter into a capital campaign to raise $3 million? Are we going to be looking then a year from now or 2 years from now to raise another $3 million to complete Little Blessings? We've acquired, whatever the cost of that land was, $900,000 or so of an additional liability on our books. I'm really, really concerned that we resolve the Little Blessing issue before we move forward with a capital campaign. And it's a suggestion that I made last night. Maybe there is an option for other churches to get involved and to create the new Little Blessings on this new property. And that's a question that certainly needs to be asked. But before that question is asked, the logical question, is there a need? What's the feasibility of a new daycare center? How could a new coalition of a half a dozen churches operate it any more successfully than we're operating it right now? Maybe there would be more students. Maybe it could be 150 students. Maybe the numbers would change. But before you hold a summit conference, which I suggested last night, we need to know or be convinced that it is feasible, that there is a market for it, and that this new coalition, if it did exist, could operate it in a financially sound manner. There's some tough decisions to be made. I'm deeply concerned that owning that land, not resolving the question of the daycare center, and doing a capital campaign for needed building improvements is going to frighten folks. It frightens me. You know, I'm sold a business a few years ago and want to live, you know, happily ever after in the villages. But looking at a $3 million capital campaign plus the potential of another $3 million to build a daycare center frightens me.
Mm-hmm. And thanks, Jim. Thank you. I appreciate that so much. And I appreciate all of the work that you've put into it. I think what the session is saying, and elders who are here can clarify or disagree if it's not right. I think what the session is saying is that there's not an intent for North Lake to do a $3 million campaign to build a new school on that property. That there's no, I couldn't recommend that. The session doesn't see that as one of the potential. Now, the only way it would happen would be to say if there is a group of other churches or other entities in the community that want to accomplish that, and then we'd say that there are multiple sources of funding. But the way it's said is we are not proposing that North Lake relocate and build that school on the new property. So that's not to say there wouldn't ever be another campaign to maybe pay down the rest of the mortgage or something else that we see, but it wouldn't be for the purpose of building a school. Right. Elders, is that fair? So those of you who are in the meeting, is that fair? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Can I get a runner? Would somebody be willing to be a runner for me? Thanks, John. I did, yeah.
My name is Dwayne Swanberg, and I've been with the church since 1995. We have a loan, I guess, on the property we just bought, and we're paying interest on that loan.
Right.
It seems to me, maybe based on what you've discussed, we ought to go ahead and sell that property, take our lumps, and direct that interest to other areas of the church.
Right. Dwayne, that's a great observation. And so just a little more information. One is the North Lake session determined to borrow from our reserves a little more than around $300,000, so that we're borrowing from the bank about $550,000. Still, to your point, there is principal and interest with that. It amounts to about $50,000. There's also some maintenance, so when you add it all up, you're quoting 60 to 60. Yeah, so you're right. One of the things that we are looking at is if we have a successful capital campaign, and I believe we can, then within a year we can have that paid off. We'll just be able to pay off the property and own it as an asset and be able to use that in some fashion if it's deemed right. The other thing is there are still properties being developed right along that line. It's an area that I think is still in demand with what's happening across from the post office and police station, et cetera. So who knows? Nobody knows what property values are going to do. Nobody knows. But in this area, in fact, they've just commissioned a very large project adjoining Water Oaks on the other side of that property. So there's still demand, and it could be that 3 years down the road we do sell it, and it would be a major way of paying off the rest of our church mortgage. It's one of the things we're looking at. We've got good people, not better than I, who are looking at all the possibilities and how best to manage that. But clearly discerning what to do with the property, if anything, and then when and how to dispose of it if we choose to sell it is a great, and we don't want to be paying interest in principal and interest any longer than we need to. So appreciate the question. It's a great one. Tom, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Tom Ledoux, I'm an elder, and as many of you know, I was the administrator for about 4 years, so I'm pretty familiar with the financial statements here at the church. And Jim, the Finance Committee shares every one of your concerns. We don't see any viable way that you can have another capital campaign for a number of years. You just can't flow from one capital campaign to another. So there's no way we would ever consider building a building for Little Blessings out on the Teague Road property. That's just financially makes no sense at this point. We have some challenges. We have the challenges of paying down the debt. Obviously, the capital campaign is crucial to this. If we can't reach that $3 million, and I agree with Jeff, I think we can, but if we can't reach the $3 million, it's going to make it very difficult. We may need to consider at some point in the next few years selling that Teague property, especially if we want to go ahead with the improvements, and I think we all agree that the improvements that are being proposed are quite important to the continued life of the church. We also, as Jeff mentioned, the operating budget for 2019, we've projected revenue at the same rate, same amount as 2018. The reason we've done that is we've seen over the last 6 months a decline. It's a small decline, but a decline in giving to the operating budget, and that concerns us. We're not sure why. However, as Jeff mentioned, attendance has been down now for a number of years, 1%, 2%, 3% a year. There are a number of reasons for that. I think the church is stabilized. We're no longer in a growth area. But as you see attendance go down, you normally would anticipate that giving goes down. And that hasn't happened until the last 6 months. So we're being very cautious as we go forward. So our challenge is where is our operating budget? Where is our giving going to be over the next 6 months, over the next year? What's the capital campaign going to raise in the next 3 months? In the next 6 months, by the May or June, the session will know a lot of that. We'll have a better idea of what our giving. Was it just an aberration the last 6 months, or is it going to continue to decrease? The other question is, what is the facility, the improvements both for the chapel and the offices, what is that ultimately going to cost? We have some projections, but that's all they are. Hopefully in the next 5, 6 months, we'll have some better numbers. So much of this, we have a lot of questions. We should have some answers, or at least have more information by May or June that'll help the session and the Finance Committee to make some recommendations.
Okay. Oh, there we go.
Hi, yeah, Jenny Dever. Sorry. Concerning the children of Little Blessings, you had mentioned that competition was an issue. Are there a variety of options for those children who attend Little Blessings out there for them? I mean, I realize that's a difficult question, but just with your experience and the studies that have been done, right, is there some knowledge of that?
Even last night, those questions were being asked, and part of what we were hoping was that the consultant we had was doing some market analysis for us to get more detail. Linda said that there are no other churches offering precisely what we offer. There are other, maybe this one does a small preschool, or this one does some daycare, but there's nobody else doing the combination that we do. There are other choices. Villages has their own now. So, whereas there were literally maybe 1 or 2 other options when it was opened, now there are many. Somebody said they opened up or went on the internet and found 60 options that were in a vicinity of the villages. So. The fact of the matter is, it's a different landscape now. It's a very different landscape for daycare and for preschool. Yeah. Others? Yeah, John. We got John first, and then over there. Yeah.
You have to press a button?
No, just
okay.
Hold it.
I'm John Siska. This is addressed to you, Jeff. We've heard about consultants here, and I need a background of when did a consultant start, if they started, when do they expect to finish, and it's going to be a lot of items they're going to be consulting on and recommending. I can see we'll have another 5 more forums to discuss what they're going to recommend. I'm just curious about what the consultings are doing and when will they finish.
Great question. Thank you. So the one that I was referring to was the consultant Bob Siegel, who came down from Chicago to help us with Little Blessings. So his focus is on the Little Blessings preschool daycare center. We have some of his input already, but not his finished product. And because of his medical health, we don't know exactly. It's one of God's surprises for me, is that what we thought we had to get in November, he could not deliver. And so we're still waiting on that. We have some input from him, but we don't have his finished report. We also have worked with, Tom made a reference to getting some projections. So we have worked with the church architect who actually built this space to get some projected costs for the projects that we're discussing. And I don't think I'm saying anything out of turn when we hear that it could be like 1.2 to 1.5, but don't hold me to that. Let's get those numbers, much more precise. And it could be more, and some of that depends on how soon you can build. because the sooner you build, the lower the cost, and the longer you wait to do it, you're going to expect it's going to be a higher cost. So those are the only two outside sources that we have right now have been on Little Blessings and on the construction costs. We did ask our architect and about a site development plan and how much it would cost to develop that site if we're going to do something on Tig Trail, to get some rough ideas of that. That helped us last summer to realize what has been said, that undertaking the move of Little Blessings to that place and to do the site development and the construction of a school that would be suitable for the 21st century, I do not see the bridge to that future. I don't see the bridge to that future. So, okay, does that help? Okay, others, yeah.
My name's Chuck Alt. I'm very encouraged with the presentation and the opinions that have been offered here today. And I kind of came primed to...
Hold that up, please. Hold it up. Thank you.
Came primed to share with you my thoughts that have already been expressed in large degree, so I'm going to spare you that time. I do think that it's very important to have a good financial understanding of what we're getting into. Pastor Jeff, I do recall when about 10 years ago, a similar goal expressed by staff that we would pay off the mortgage that we had taken on when we decided to go ahead with this project, and it didn't happen, as I think you know. It was well intended, and I appreciate that, but I just cite it as an example that we have to be realistic. I think beyond that, I really only wanted to encourage those that are here, and obviously by being here, you're the ones that have an interest, that we get a better understanding within the church of the financial picture. I was disappointed at the last meeting when we took the vote that at the end, someone asked a very cogent question, well, what does this mean? And if I understood the answer, and I really don't want to hold up any people because now we know and we have the answer, but at the time it was pretty obvious to me that it meant we were going to take on a debt service of another $50,000 that you expressed. It was pretty simple arithmetic, but the answer at that meeting, as I understood it, was it'd be about a $3,000 or $4,000 cost. And as I say, there's no good point in trying to resurrect that, but I think going forward, the points that have been made today are very important, and I just really want to support that. And at the same time, while I'm up, support on the other side that we have a lot to be thankful for, including our pastor. I haven't attended it in my lifetime of attending church. I haven't found one that has the things that we have that are so positive. And it's frustrating to me because I do know that our attendance doesn't reflect what I expected, and I don't know why either. But so we have a lot to be positive about, but I think we have to recognize our limitations financially. I'll just end with, I know of at least one couple that when they had the borough program, they gave at the leadership level and increased their giving, and then continued to give at that level to this day. But to a point made earlier, for those of us in the category of the fixed income, I'm not sure as time goes on that you can expect a similar kind of increase again. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Chuck. That's well said. I appreciate that. I also, just to respond, I think, on one thing that Dennis probably has precisely, but the question of how much it would cost, the annual cost to the church. There was an initial indication that they would allow us to roll the cost of the purchase into our existing mortgage, which would have been considerably lower cost had they permitted that. We found out after that meeting, probably in late August, early September, that the bank wanted a new note on that, and so that's the difference. I think that the information that was shared at that meeting was done in good faith, but I think it misunderstood or misread what the bank was willing to do. So, yeah.
I'm Sue Bodenner, and I would say the chart that you used, or the graph on your feelings on Little Blessings, was similar to mine. When I first met Linda and saw what she was accomplishing there, I was very energetic about Little Blessings as a new member of the church. And as we learned more, it faded for myself as well. And I think last night's attendance was somewhat indicative, and some of the other indicators that are there for the passion for Little Blessings, it doesn't feel strong enough. So I appreciate the fact that, that there's an honest conversation about that. But you mentioned early on about one of the deficits is communication. And I would say that we might not have had such a long period of time not understanding Little Blessings if we'd had financial statements that really were more clear. And I wondered if the session has talked about changing how they do reporting, because I have to say personally, I'm suspect now of, well, how is the finance for Homebound and how is the finance for the food pantry? And when you talk about a capital campaign, Jim and I have always kind of crunched numbers in running our own business. And, there's not really an indication to us of how feasible the campaign is. Maybe I'm, cart ahead of the horse, but, how many regular donors do we have, and what would it take to reach that $3 million? I think in one of my communications to you, I did my own kind of, how many people would be willing to donate $5,000 just to reduce debt. I really strongly believe that the church needs to be debt-free in order to be actively responsible and be able to use our gifts to continue to do a lot of the good work that has been done by people before us. And carrying debt like this is, to me, is kind of insane.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I will say that I did take Accounting 101 and Accounting 102 and 12 credits of economics, and just enough so I'd be able to read books and understand business if I went into law, which is what I thought I was going to do. And I know that when I first arrived here, I had a lot of questions as well about the financial system and how each of those entities was relating to the overall budget of North Lake. And I don't think there's anything, there's nothing there that's untoward. We're audited, we have all that looked at, but it doesn't provide easy access to information for decision making. And I think that's what I was hearing from your group as you were doing deeper study, and it needs to be clearer how much of that hidden cost or infrastructure is being absorbed by the church in each case. I think we've got strong support. I see Vicki, and Dave sitting here, and I know we've got strong support for Operation Homebound, but it's also great to know what is that? How much does that? What's that look like? And how is the church stepping up to do that? And similarly with Christian Food Pantry. And so I think, yes, the answer is the session and your pastor are very much after that information and trying to access that in a way that we were getting more information as we probe deeper with Little Blessings. And as to the indebtedness, I think we want to be in that place where we are debt-free. I know that's a principle that I, felt good about leaving a church without any debt.
Is there a basic analysis of what it would take?
Now I'm going to turn to our co-chairs. I'm going to ask Dottie and Jim to speak, to count me in, and any of the thoughts that you have about that. Because yes, there is work that's been done on that.
The question of creating operating statements that adequately reflect the revenue and expenses is not a complicated subject. You know, basic cost accounting. When I visited the Orlando Daycare Center, the Presbyterian churches, they pulled out operating statements for the daycare center, and they had all of the expenses itemized, including administration expenses. You know, that simply needs to be the session directing finance to do it. And there was tremendous pushback when I breached this subject a year ago. It's got to be done. You cannot just push this question off. That decision could be made right here, right now, that we're going to create operating statements that reflect the operations of these individual units.
Okay, Jim.
Well, thank you. I'm Jim McKeithen. I'm going to get to know a lot of you a lot better over the next several months, I hope. I am a member of the Capital Campaign, and we have named it Count Me In. It's all encompassing. It's just exactly what we would expect from a capital campaign. We want everybody to be involved. We want everybody in the congregation to be counted. Go back and clarify a couple of things that I've heard, if I may. Several things are happening at one time. First of all, this coming Sunday, there's an opportunity to pledge and contribute to the operating budget of the church. Very, very important. It is not part of the capital campaign. It's the ongoing stewardship program that's there. So please, I want to mention that, though it's not mixed. That's important. That's what makes the church run day after day after day. That's a different problem for the finance and the budget people, but not a part of it. The other part is that our campaign is to raise at least, I'm the one who likes this word, at least $3 million. How do we do it? We have lots of members of the congregation, 1,500, 1,200, there's a difference in families and individuals. If each member over a 3-year period pledges to give $3,000, that's more than $3 million. My favorite thing is I'm looking for 300 people to pledge $10,000 over 3 years. That's $3,333.33 per year. Yes, it's a lot of money. We understand that. We can't take it with us. Anyway, but capital campaign is primarily geared for the following reason, and Jeff mentioned it earlier. We want to improve this facility by raising enough money that we can break ground and build a chapel on the side over here. We want to increase the office space so they're not walking over each other. We want to increase the space for the choir, build a conference room, and then more important than that, because that's the easy part, we want to reduce the debt of the church. If we're successful, and I really plan for us to be, because we got an enormous amount of talented people in this committee working to make it work, and we have a congregation that I know loves what we have here. Just look around. Look what's been accomplished by this congregation in 25 years. It's a facility like no other in the villages. If you're like me, the moment you drive onto this campus, you feel good. Everything changes. No matter what was happening out on Rolling Acres or any of the other streets or your home or your street, no matter what, you drive on this campus, park your car when you can find space, come inside, whether it's in here, the fellowship hall, the sanctuary, the new chapel that's going to be established, into the offices to be, you feel better about yourself and what's going on. And that's what we want to happen. We want everybody to be counted in, and because of your interest in the financial health of the church, you're here. You're getting an advance notice of what won't even be kicked off until the middle of February. So you're getting an opportunity to go home right now and start looking in your checking account and your. Someone asked me one time, he says, "Are you a financial advisor?" I said, "No way." However, if I were recommending some good financial planning for yourselves, it would be to count you in. Thank you.
Okay, here to Steve. Oh, okay, yeah, Dottie, thank you.
I just wanted to speak to the capital campaign. Jim is the co-chair of the campaign, and hold on to those pocketbooks, or bring them with you, because you can see Jim's enthusiasm for what we're doing. And I just want to mention that we've been working on this for a couple months, and we really want to do what God wants us to do. We are a church. We're not asking you to do this just because we want the church to look nicer. We've seen needs. The chapel's a big need, and certainly the office space, and certainly the choir that kind of was supposed to happen last time and it didn't happen, and we want to make sure that this happens this time. But also the debt, as you've mentioned. We don't want a church that we're paying toward this debt every month and not able to launch the programs that God wants us to launch if we don't have that money to pay. So you can hear the enthusiasm on Jim's part. Every one of our members has been working toward this. You're going to hear more from us the middle of February. You're going to see banners. You're going to receive a little pen. You're going to receive some mailings. And I just ask you to ask God what he would like you to give. Yes, we're all on fixed incomes, but Jim said it right. We can't take it with us. And is there a better way to donate money than for God's work? So thank you for your interest in this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Steve?
My name is Steve Cummings, and it's been 8 people since I first thought of something. But first of all, I'd like to say about the debt-free, there's nothing more attractive to new people coming into this church, because they will look at our financials to see that we're debt-free. When they see debt, they go, there's a problem. Doesn't matter what we think it is, it's a problem. So debt-free is very important. Secondly, up on the screen were little blessings. There was a bullet point about the competitiveness, and we spoke to competitiveness about the 55 people or organizations around that do that. Last night was brought up a very good point. Competitiveness also goes to the staffing, and we're down about 2%, 3% available, and there's no people to do this job. They're all got better jobs than we can afford in this. That's a huge challenge in this. There's another one. And third, Jeff, last night when you were saying about how you came here, and I'd like you to repeat what you came here, what you saw or were understood to be little blessings. This wasn't something you knew, this situation. That came up in 17. When you came here, it was rolling along. Everything was good. You had staff. You had money. It wasn't even, it was just a sideline. Interested, very positive toward it, but it was a sidebar because you were looking at the whole church. This was not a standout as an issue. Am I correct that you were saying that last night?
That's not true. That's not true.
No.
If the financial statements have been properly done, reflecting all of the income and expenses.
So, yeah, if you're going to speak, do we need to make
It
sure?
would not, if you allocated all of the income and expenses that are attributed to that daycare center from the beginning, you will find that it isn't and has not been a profitable operation. The church at least deserves the right to know. If it's losing $100,000 a year and the church wants to adopt that as a ministry, at least they know that they're taking $100,000 out of their operating budget to fund the ministry. But when you don't have operating statements that adequately reflect the cost of this and the other 2 ministries, you're shooting in the dark.
And I believe that that's what we're attempting to redress. What I think what Steve is alluding to is that upon arrival, I was advised that at the time, Little Blessings was not in dire need of financial, beyond what was already being spent in the infrastructure, in let's say hidden costs. Beyond that, it was at least breaking even. Christian Food Pantry breaking even. At that time, Operation Homebound, there was a distress signal that had gone up for that, and that's why we made it the Christmas offering, and we set an elaborate goal of $50,000 and was told that we probably wouldn't hit that, but we set a goal for the Christmas offering in 2015, and we reached that goal, which bought us some time to redo the model for Operation Homebound. Now, that doesn't deal with the accounting question. I hear the accounting question. I understand what you're saying, and I'm committed for that to happen. I'm committed. You can all hear that. I'm committed for that to happen. So we have an accurate picture of exactly what the costs are to the church for any and all ministries. Right? And again, this is a difficult thing for me to say without it feeling unfair maybe to those who've been working here for a long time. But there are a lot of things that were done because they made sense in that moment, and the church was growing and flourishing, and they were able to do it without worry. There were just no worries. You know, Bob Cook said to me I could plug in 10% increase a year because I just knew we were growing and we could add 10% every year to what the budget would be. I mean, I'd love to be in a situation like that. I've never been in a situation like that. You know, we've always had to be much better stewards and just say, oh, add 10% and you can count on it. Right? And that allowed North Lake to get into some patterns that were not as scrupulous and as careful as I think we all want it to be. And that's what we're moving towards. So I hear the request. I also believe that it's going to be a high priority for us to have that. And yes, it can happen fairly quickly, but the point is we need that information to be able to make those kind of decisions. We didn't fully appreciate that till we got into the Little Blessings research. That's what uncovered it in its depth. And I think that's, all I'm saying is when I arrived, it was like, we're okay here, we got to give attention here. And that was, you know, that's a summary statement of it. Yeah. Claudia?
I'm Claudia Cummings, and I just have a follow-up on Sue's question. Do we know the number of pledging units that we have at North Lake?
So we know the number of giving units, right? How many different households are giving units. Until a couple years ago, we actually weren't keeping track of pledges. When I arrived, I was surprised that there wasn't any pledging. There were no pledging records, none. And so even when pledges had been submitted, they weren't either recorded or tabulated. And so we said early on, then when I arrived, okay, this data may be meaningless until we've done it for 5, 6, 7 years, but at least we're going to begin to do it so that we get a baseline of how much people are pledging, how much is given above the amount pledged, and over a period of time, we get more and more meaningful data. So in answer to your question, we are moving in that direction. That's one of the things I'm asking. But we have giving units of...
We have giving units as well as the number of pledge units over the past few years. I don't have that on top of my head, but I have it on the computer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. To the back? Thank you.
I'm Tim Heesberger. I'm trying to follow all this, and I'm a little bit confused. We have a $3 million campaign, if I'm correct. What is each one of our goals or properties or extensions or whatever we want to call these things? What is that going to cost us? Where did we get $3 million from?
Okay, good. I'll take a stab at that, and then maybe some others want to add to it. So the $3 million is a target goal that would enable us to do the new construction, as well as perhaps, best case scenario, cut the mortgage in half, cut the total indebtedness in half. So how do we know what the new construction will cost? Well, and that's what we are now moving to get those Part of this is also looking to see what the results of the campaign are. I think it's always a question of how much, when do we spend the money, and what we want to know. We'd like to know that the congregation is behind us before we go to spend, because the construction drawings are what you need to get a hard cost on the building. And so we've worked with the architect to go about as far as we can go without paying significantly more en route to the construction. On the basis of what we know, we're looking at $1.2 to $1.5 million. That's also predicated on, and I was advised before this meeting, let's not give a range. It's like, but everybody's asking for a range. All we can tell you is what we know so far. And the other information is the sooner we can break ground, the sooner we can go after that, the more assured we are of being in that range and at the lower end of it. So the sooner the better. What that means is the better the pledging and the sooner the giving comes in, that is 2019 giving, the sooner it comes in, the stronger position we're in for doing that construction. We'd like to do it, we'd like to see pledging for $3 million plus, and to see a full third of that or more come in the first year. And we'd be in a position after the pledging to know, okay, we now know, and we can go to the architect and say, let's go to the next step, and we're going to pay whatever X number of dollars it is for that, and be able to say we're going to be able to break ground a year from now, or we're going to break ground. You know, there's a bit of a conundrum to be able to say all of those numbers before we've done the campaign. Sure.
Let me say a couple of things. The architect that did this building and did the Methodist Church is completing the second Methodist Church in Lake Deaton. So he's right in the middle of a construction of a church. When this building project ended, the property of the building cost $135 a square foot. That was 2013, 5 years ago, going on 6 this June. The architect currently indicates that the cost of just a general building like the offices is about $180 a square foot. A chapel cost in the 200 to 200 and a quarter. It's really hard on that one because we don't exactly know how it's going to be conditioned on the inside, what it's going to look like exactly. We have ideas, but that's about the range. So we know the square footage, and we know the general cost. Those are minimums, and that is about $1,050,000 on the construction today at Today Economics. So you take it from there with the increases. So that's how we got to that number. The rest is just paying down the mortgages.
Okay, the other thing, I wasn't aware of Little Blessings and their conundrum. And evidently we aren't really clear on the other two of the big three, where they stand also?
We're very clear on their operational success. What we can't say is exactly how many dollars North Lake is contributing through all of the various, what portion of Operation Homebound insurance is covered by North Lake? What portion of their payroll cost is covered? What portion of their utility? I mean, all of that on cost accounting would be broken down, so we'd be able to say, here's the portion of the costs for North Lake that are all attributable to Operation Homebound. Now, we know that they're operating comfortably, but we don't know how much of that is because of the North Lake infrastructure and support, and that's what we're attempting to get to. But we don't have the same concern about those two because of reserves that they have and because of their overall, if you will, vitality at this point. Right? So they're really, those two are in a different situation than Little Blessings. But all three of them, we want to get to a better accounting of how much is North Lake contributing in all of the ways of supporting it.
Do that, then the congregation will be aware of.
Yeah, this is, to me, it's of the utmost importance. That's why we do these meetings now, is just to say, we want to be as transparent as we can be. We want to have good information. We want solid information. We're trying to make sure that it is out there for anybody to have access to it. That is something that I have been working towards since I arrived here. Like, how do we do this so that it is, it's full disclosure. It's just so anybody who wants this information, aside from confidential staffing information or something like that, but it's available. We're trying to do that consistently in everything. Right?
For information on the food pantry, the food pantry main building was built in 1998. The property was purchased by the villages, and the building was constructed by the villages and donated. In 2002, the villages handed the title to Bob Cook, so the pantry owns the building in essence. I mean, the church does, but the building is dedicated to the pantry, as is the property.
Mm-hmm. Good, good. I want to point out we're just past an hour and a half. And I'm going to say arbitrarily that I'll continue until 4:30. If you need to get up and go, please feel free. We're gonna call time at 4:30. So,
Judy Etheridge, I'm just going to point out a couple of things. I think Tom and the rest of you, Jim, have done an excellent job of letting us know how difficult it would be to move or build or do anything with Little Blessings. But I do think that when we had the vote, and we had 75% of the people voted yes, it was my understanding that that land was really viewed as a possible new home for Little Blessings. So I think it's very important that we let the congregation know exactly what is taking place with Little Blessings. And it's not being successful financially, but it's had a wonderful life for the past 20 years, and so many people shared last night the tremendous effect that this had upon their individual family. Jim, you talked about the special group of, and you did too, Jeff, about having some kind of study where we would bring in other churches to see if that was something that they would be willing to work with us. I think that's the next thing that we really do need to determine. Are we going to have that kind of study so that when we talk to the congregation or when you have the annual meeting and you present that information, they know, are we really going to look at Little Blessings, or is that something that we are just going to say, at this point, we're not going to do it? And I guess I just think that's the next thing that we really do need to look at. Mm-hmm. And my very last comment, and Fran and I talked about this last night, you know, in this day and age, you hear so much about how the family is no longer as important and how the church is no longer as important. And having a facility that does give those Christian values, and this is what Linda tried to get across last night so much, you know, that's pretty important. So I just throw that out as an additional comment.
Right. We do believe that with or without Little Blessings, and that our commitment at North Lake to children and youth and young families is very strong. And in fact, we're seeing fresh signs of the Spirit working in our youth group like never before. And so there are many encouraging signs about what can happen with ministry with younger folks and families. That we're not going to relinquish that. But Little Blessings has been a significant component of that, unmistakably. I will say again what I was trying to say before. I think Session is declaring that we at North Lake and we as North Lake will not undertake moving and building Little Blessings School on that property. But we will be willing to explore to see if there are any other partners out there who want to create a new consortium or a new group that would oversee and become champions for Little Blessings too. And again, I'll sound the trumpet for that and try to see if there are other clergy and other community leaders around that. But we won't have that done by the congregational meeting. We will not have that done by our capital campaign. That's something that's going to happen after Easter. It won't happen, in these next couple of months. There'll be some preparatory conversations. We've got to do some feasibility. I mean, we're at earliest case, that's probably late spring before we can do anything along that line. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Vicki Rudell. I'm the director of Operation Homebound. I just want to say thank you to each of you who is here today, because it shows that you are really committed and looking to how the church is run and what is going on. And I also want to say thank you to the financial folks who have been involved in a very long and arduous process. It's very difficult to make the hard decisions that our leaders are being faced with. And I guess I want to offer my just concern and prayers to that process. On a collaborative level, Linda and I have worked very well together in the last 6 years since I've been on. And it's benefited our clients so much to get their little valentines from all the kids from Little Blessings. And they'll write notes about it. It's because they're so in their houses 24/7, they don't either maybe have the families that the grandchildren would send valentines or whatever to them. It means a great deal to them. And so I guess I just want to say that it's, while it's difficult to make the decision to close a ministry that's been around for 20 years, and it also affects so many people in so many different ways, I also know that Dave and I are here because God brought us here. And he did that 10 years ago. And I know that I'm here because I'm supposed to be here. And I hope that Operation Homebound is, I don't hope, I know that we are in the community and helping people. And the reason that we can is because of you guys. You give us dollars, you give us prayers. I always ask for prayers for the operation because it's important. And in the community, you guys, I mean, my job description has changed. And so I am in the community more now. And I do see and hear what a wonderful church North Lake is and how much Operation Homebound is appreciated. So that's been a different perspective for me. And I'm very glad to have had that. But I just want to say, again, it's really difficult to make these kinds of decisions. And I just thank our leadership.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Vicki. Yeah.
I'm Fred Eekhoff, and I just want to I'm not a good speaker, but anyway, I don't know what city we belong to. Do we belong in what's the name? Lady Lake? Mm-hmm. Maybe we should talk to the Council of Lady Lake about these problems we have with this institution to provide teaching for young people, because there is a need for young people that are working and that need to have a place for their kids. So I don't know, maybe this is wishful thinking, but I think maybe we should talk to
I think, Fred, that's
a
great suggestion. I actually think we need to have conversations beyond just churches. And I think that's a good example. I think we need to talk to the right persons at the villages, and we need to explore with a number of folks and to see, first of all, we have to see is there a feasibility, is there a way that this could be workable in our market? I think that's a question that has to be answered before we go soliciting interest from other groups. But if we do go looking for interest from other groups, I think Lady Lake and other community leadership would have to be included. Yeah, it's good. Thanks. Other questions? Oh, go ahead, John. Yeah.
I just wanted to say something about Little Blessings. I was not here when it started, but I was here in 2003 when Faith Forward started, and Paul Green mentioned that last night. I saw him earlier, but he left. Paul Green was part of Session at that time. There was a need. Little Blessing was growing. The congregation stepped up and donated over $250,000 as part of Faith Forward to build the Little Blessing building. It was their dream to do that. It was the right thing to do at that time. Things have changed, but just imagine if we hadn't done that. All the children and so forth. We can talk about how the finances are handled. The view then was it was a mission of the church. The view has continued up until the last year. It's still a mission of the church, but it's time to look at it differently. But it was at the behest of our congregation with the support of Session. We are here. That's why we're here today with Little Blessings. Mm-hmm. And I am happy to have been part of that in 2003. I'm sorry that this is the situation today, but we'll do the best we can to address these situations. But it has been a good thing and a blessing to our church and to our community.
Amen. And I think, I wish, Paul has left, but Paul spoke last night, and his words were just shining with grace and splendor of what God has done through Little Blessing, and the view of that. And see, that's why I said anything that we say that is questioning the viability or sustainability or effectiveness now of Little Blessings is not intended to target those who were around or making those decisions 5, 10, 15 years ago. Quite the contrary. I mean, I feel immense gratitude for what has happened and for the way that the church has stepped up repeatedly to make it happen. I also think that it's a different landscape now than that time, and that's a hard thing to have to face. I think it's a different landscape. And we are now in a situation where we have to look at it, and I've listed all the things that I think are concerns, but the point that you're making is right on. Good. God used that school and daycare center to bless many children, many families, staff members who've worked there, and persons who got cards, so both directly and indirectly has used that. So there's no doubt about that. And in fact, if there's a way for it to continue effectively into the future, I'd love to see that happen. If there's a way for that to be extended and to grow. As recently as last spring, that's where I was. That's what I put on paper. It's one of our big three. We're trying to commit to its viability for a sustainable future. And it's been the disconcerting learnings of the last 6 to 8 months that have changed the way I see it. So, others? Questions? Yeah. Jim, okay.
Just a final comment, and I'm doing it just to address a question that came up earlier. The Capital Campaign Committee, the Count Me In Committee, is not hiring consultants. All the funds collected will stay and remain as part of the capital campaign. A lot of money through the years, you go out, we're going to do this, we're going to hire all these consulting firms. We got the best consultants ever, and it's right in this room. And so the committee has worked hard. When you start seeing the fruits of our labors, you'll understand why. But I just wanted you to know that Consultants are not part of the picture, so when you give, you're not paying off some big firm somewhere.
Through, in December, we had all of our family gathered at our home for a week of what we call Happy Chaos, with eight adults, 3 grandchildren, a big dog, and we added my parents to that a few days, and so we had a constellation of 4 generations a lot together. When we get together for something like that, we love to do an activity, something that everybody can participate in. So this year for Christmas, we went to Dunellen, Florida. Some of you know it's about an hour west of here, and got on a pontoon boat called the Singing River Tour. Anybody done the Singing River Tour? So a few of you have done it, and so it's a pleasant experience. And it was, we had our granddaughters were rolling around on the deck of the pontoon boat, and what happens is that you go to Dunellen and into the city boat ramp, and they meet you there at the dock and take you out. And the captain actually has a very nice voice. He actually sings. He stops and sings in a place where he's singing some Florida folklore songs, and it's fun. It's enjoyable. We did enjoy it. You go on the Withlacoochee River for much of the time, and then you also go on to the Rainbow River. Now, the Withlacoochee River starts down in the Green Swamp, and it winds its way north and eventually out to the Gulf. The Rainbow River is created by Rainbow Springs. Rainbow Springs is one of the largest artesian springs in the world, and certainly one of the biggest in Florida, and so it creates the river. When you are on this boat and going for a ride, and by the way, the captain is a real proponent of ecology and the greatest resource of Florida, it's water and the aquifer, et cetera. You learn a lot, too, about the environment. It's fascinating. As you go on the Withlacoochee River, it is black. It's a dark river. And it takes all the pigment from the bald cypress trees along the edge that create that darkness. Then when you go on the Rainbow River, it's as clear as can be. Whether it's 5 feet deep or 10 feet deep, you can see all the way there. You can see everything. Just crystal clear. And it's a very popular river for kayaking and tubing, etc. So this tour, you are going from black water to clear to black, and back and forth. And the captain said to us, this black water is as fresh and clean and good and life-giving as the clear water. You just can't see through it as well. And when I was praying the other morning, I thought, that's where I am. I love when I can see the bottom. I love when I can see everything just clearly, and everything is just as clear as it needs to be. But there are times when we're on the Withlacoochee, and it's dark, and you can't see the bottom, or you can't see through it as well as you want to see through it. And I'm reminded, this is still good and fresh and life-giving where we are, because it's God's doing, God's giving this, and we as a church are so blessed and so fortunate. It's good. It's good. But we just can't see everything we want to see. And we'll have other moments when we'll have greater clarity. Many times when you're in a season of discernment, you have more questions than you have answers. And back and forth we go from the Rainbow River to the Withlacoochee and so forth, and you see sometimes and other times you don't. But God's there in all of that. And we need each other and we need the Lord. God, thank you for this day. Thank you for this gathering. Thanks for blessing us, loving us, walking with us, encouraging us. Thank you for words spoken. Thank you for prayers offered in the last couple of hours. Thank you for everyone here and those who wish they could be here and those who will watch it on video. Most of all, we thank you that your grace is at work at North Lake, We know that you have plans for us. Help us to discover them and to fulfill your will. We ask it humbly, but with great hope in Jesus' name. Amen.